she shares the link with me afterwards, I'll post it on my Facebook page as well as the Jewish Conservatives Club group page, and you can refer people there, and you can watch it again and again and again. Both candidates will be introduced and have 10 minutes to say whatever the heck they want. And then I'll ask them questions for 20 to 30 minutes, and then you'll ask them questions for 20 to 30 minutes. Then they'll each have 1 minute for a closing statement. And now let us begin with an introduction of Tim Wilkins. Born into a working-class California family, Tim learned the value of hard work before he was tall enough to see over the family's butcher shop counter. By high school, he was working construction in the summer heat. After graduating, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at 17 years old. After the Corps, Tim toured the country as a professional comedian, performing alongside legends like Aretha Franklin, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Lionel Richie, before transitioning into the world of venture capital, business compliance, and entrepreneurship. For the past decade in Central Florida, Tim has served as CFO of a successful animation and visual effects studio, co-founded a faith-based film production company, and helped establish a private school now serving over 160 students. Please welcome Tim Wilkins.
Thank you.
And Tim, you have 10 minutes.
After Lee's amazing introduction, I've got 7 minutes left. It is wonderful. Thank you all so very much for coming today. And this is a very special group. I didn't want to spoil this with Lee, but my first kiss was at Jackie Cooper's bat mitzvah. On the golf course at Westlake Country Club. So by the time I was 15, I'd been to more bar and bat mitzvahs than the cantor soloist himself, so I could do a motzi or a kiddush with the best of them. It is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be with you folks today. Like Lee said, I've got a very diverse background. Joined the Marines at 17. Mom was not happy about that. She had to sign for me. Thank you, Captain. She had to go get it notarized. She was with the recruiter who was from Brooklyn. Hey, Carrie. And she was with the recruiter who was from Brooklyn. Someone cut us off. He rolled down his window, threw out a few choice words that were all expletives. And Mom turned over the seat and said, "And that's why we don't join the Marines." And I said, "What do we join, Mother? AA?" True stuff. So that was the foundation for the character and the things that built that were maybe not instilled that I should have had. The Marines set the foundation for my discipline, self-reliance, leadership. From there, I did end up following that second dream of going into entertainment, stand-up comedy, touring the world, TV, radio, a professional speaker that covered a lot of ground like compliance, moved into the venture capital world, 16 years in the consumer debt industry. So when this generation says things are unaffordable, I know where they're spending their money. Yes, things are expensive, but they're buying a lot of $8 coffee. I've seen their credit card bills.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that I've seen that I enjoy, a lot of things that I would do differently were I in office. Now, speaking of office, my wife and I jumped into this process and took it very seriously. This is something that I've wanted to do my entire life. I've followed this process. I've been working behind the scenes with the RNC and the GOP for over 25 years. We went up to DC and had amazing meetings with House leadership and the White House and started to pave that path so I could get to work as soon as I got up there. We talked about not necessarily getting the freshman treatment, getting put in the back and on horrible committees and caucuses. We talked about what caucuses and committees I'd like to be on to have the greatest impact for the state and the country. Some of the bigger ones, budgeting, appropriations, the Republican Study Group that guides policy, and one of my late favorites, the Sharia-Free America Caucus. My friend Carrie and I have some similarities. We have one, I'm sure at this point, that if it wasn't one of the two of us, the one thing it can't be is the Muslim doctor that's running. I'll tell you that right here and now. So if it's not one of us, I fear what's coming next. We do have a lot of things that need to be addressed, especially the things people can relate to right here, right now. Healthcare is a disaster. It was put on us by Obama, that Affordable Care Act that was supposed to make things cheaper, cap rates. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. All lies. And the only people that got rich and that got better were the insurance companies. We need to revamp that, look at the risk pool, allow people to pool, into groups to lower costs as well. Transparency, that's a big issue. Drug costs. Anybody on pills? Not recreationally, like medicinal pills. Thank you. It's a good time up here. Why do we go into Publix and the pill is $160? And then she says, what discount card do you have? Oh, I have GoodRx. Oh, it's $82. And then the pharmacist says, oh, I have one here, it's $48. Where did the other $112 go? We need transparency, we need consistency. I would push for one price pills. That's a very important. One price pharmaceuticals. President Trump has tried to work on that with Trump RX. He's tried to get us favored nation status for the countries that we're already doing all the R&D and money for, yet it's cheaper in other countries to get the same drugs that we work to develop. That's got to go away. Immigration is a very big issue. Immigration hits us in so many ways. There are counties across this country that up to 70% of the crime, Fairfax County, Virginia, up to 70% of the crime is being committed by illegal aliens. That's one cost, but there are others. The Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas yesterday released a study that home prices jumped in value on a supply surge by up to 30%, and rents went up 20% because of the extra 7 to 10 million illegal aliens that were let in. Where do they get that money? Since they're naturally cheap labor, they're being subsidized. Their housing, their food, their phones, their school, their medical care is being subsidized at a rate higher than our seniors. People that paid into the system their entire lives. That's being subsidized with money that we have to print, which causes inflation, and then they take those subsidies and they put it into the system that through supply and demand drives up the costs. We're getting hit by illegal immigration in every direction in our pocketbooks and in our jails, and that needs to be fixed. That's one of the things I definitely want to address, as well as our kids and grandkids are getting out of college and can't get a job because of the amount of foreign workers. The H-1B visas have to be addressed. My kids, my last one is going off to college, and it's getting progressively more expensive, which every time you let the government take hold of anything, it's going to create a bloated bureaucracy. But the foreign students that are blocking there are a very big issue. So that's got to be addressed. We're going to talk about this later with some Q&A, I'm sure. But one thing that definitely needs to be addressed across college campuses, the amount of money the American government is putting into American colleges that are doing nothing more than becoming hotbeds for anti-Semitism. And I've been complaining about this for over 30 years. The last 5 to 7, you look at these giant endowments, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, tax them. Tax their endowments, cut off their infusions of cash until they crack down on this. The kafia has become a fashion statement, and kids protesting, UCLA keeping Jewish students from entering a building that they're paying $85,000 a year to go to school to is unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and it needs to be stopped here and now. So immigration, cost of living is through the roof. That's waste, fraud, and abuse. Elon put his Doge guys in there, and in 2 or 3 short months, they found almost $250 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. Millions of people on the Social Security rolls. But here's the problem. We didn't have enough fighters in Congress. We had such a bunch of wishy-washy uniparty guys. They didn't enact the Doge cuts. So we've still got those expenditures happening, which would lower costs. They're estimating through waste, fraud, and abuse and not making actual cuts in spending, but only cuts in future spending. They're estimating that it's $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. That's almost the deficit each year. By negating that, we could possibly roll back taxes 3 to 5% and not be doing the thing we're doing right now, which is the biggest expenditure in the US budget is servicing the debt. Servicing just the interest on the debt. That's not sustainable. We can't go any higher, and we've got to address it now. These are all things that I'm doing. It's very important. When you think about what one person can do as well, one of my biggest issues up here especially that I guess has been very well maintained is constituent services. Congressman Webster did a pretty solid job of putting people up here to take care of the seniors and the veterans. But I've already spoken to some people up here. I'd like to increase that staff. One of Congressman Webster's happy places, keep this between you and I, would you, buddy? One of his happy places was returning money to the American people by keeping a tight budget. We're sending $300 billion to shore up the Ukrainian pension fund. I think we can spend another $100,000 in Sumter County to make sure the seniors and the veterans are getting the most service they can get, more than just a Monday where you can come to the district office or they'll come to Lady Lake's American Legion, where they have over 11,000 veterans. That will be one of my absolute priorities. If I go up to DC, bang my head against the wall and nothing can get past all the things I want to author and co-sponsor, the one thing I can do as my legacy is make sure that I took care of my district. And that's one of the things I absolutely plan to do. It's our district, and I'm very excited to be your representative coming up here very shortly. Lee mentioned my faith, which is very strong. I've been a volunteer coach for the last 5 years for the girls' weightlifting team at a Christian school down in Winter Garden. And then 6 years ago, my wife and I said, what do we want to do with the last part of our life? One of the things I wanted to do was create better faith-based entertainment. The messaging is important, but the quality needed to come up. And in doing so, I partnered with another studio to take on the big social issues, the cake baker, the cancel culture, and then the big one was the transgender athlete issue. We created a movie, I wrote and produced it with Dean Cain and Kevin Sorbo, called And God Made Man, that tackled that from a faith-based perspective and put people on notice. It's just not common sense. And that's one of the things that's missing in Washington and across the country right now. Decency, faith, and common sense. And that's what I plan to restore when I get up there. Thank you all. I can't wait for the Q&A from Lee, from all of you, and my friend Carrie here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Same question?
Same question.
Well, for a long time, we called them anchor babies because
Yes.
people use the birthed children to get citizenship here. And that whole premise, to me, of coming here, having a baby, and you get to stay, if that was the case, I would have had my kids at the Ritz-Carlton. Let's be perfectly honest. The beauty of what the Supreme Court just did was they allowed the legislation, they said in the exact words, up to the jurisdiction thereof, meaning the legislature has the ability to go into that 14th Amendment and more clearly define what a citizen is and what constitutes someone who is birthed here to a citizen, no matter how temporary. Article 1 allows them to do that as well, so it's very important that they utilize the structure in place, fine-tune that to make it not just visitors, passers through. I think no H-1B visas, no work visas. Sure, get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. DOJ found millions of people, and just last month, 270 to 500,000 over the last quarter that received benefits that they didn't earn or deserve. Have a baby in Texas at one of the birth tourism hospitals, the hotels, and they're instantly a citizen. That is unacceptable, and it must be stopped through legislation. And here's something else to consider. They're not just potentially getting benefits like a lot of the DACA recipients and the other people. You can have a child here from China or another country that might be an enemy, go home, raise that child back, and they can come here as a natural-born citizen and take the highest office.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate Manchurian candidate, and it must be stopped. So yes, legislation must be in place. They can ever say is Social Security is an entitlement. That makes it sound like you're a petulant teenager wanting a new cell phone. You have paid into this system your entire life, and you deserve it. But Social Security has been a Ponzi scheme since the start. And the scary thing is, how can it be bankrupt when the bottom of the pyramid, the workers that should be paying into it, have doubled and tripled since your generation went into retirement? You got another 50 to 100 million workers that should be paying. So think about this. They've got 3 possible fixes for it. Raise the retirement age. I'm a hard no on that. Raise the amount deducted from paychecks. I'm a hard no on that. And then there's one more. They're talking about completely revamping the system and going into access things that shouldn't be accessed. Take that all off. We've got to look at investment. There is no lockbox that gets rated. That's a common misnomer. But what they do is they invest that in T-bills and bonds. The 50-year average for T-bills and bonds is 4.25%. Barely covers inflation and barely covers what you need to pay out to the recipients. The average for the S&P 500 for the last 50 years is 11.8. A full 7.6% that could be going back to not only shore up the system, but making sure that the recipients gain more. That's one thing I would do. The death benefit, the death unbenefit. 2 people pay into the system and only 1 person gets it if the other spouse dies and it goes back into the pool. A, how is that still insolvent? Because that should be a lot of extra money in. And B, that should be a lump sum that goes to the families. That's one thing I would definitely do. And I would also get those people off the rolls. That will help shore up the system. And then Congress needs to create a financial backstop for the system from year to year, that if there is a shortfall, or if there is a time where there's a gap in earnings between the investment, that they can back that and make sure that the system is in place. But it's unsatisfactory that every 10 years the Social Security is bankrupt and defunct. So one of the two main things you can do for your district is set up constituent services to take care of people directly in the district, and the other is bring home dollars. But as a congressman, you want to make sure you're bringing home the most effective dollars. You're not bringing home pork with roads to nowhere and a post office no one's using with your name on it. You want to make sure that you're bringing home jobs, future. And so much of this area is based on the tourism industry and ag, and it's time to bring home tech. So the kids that we have, the grandkids, can live nearby, have that American dream, buy a house, raise a family, and they need better jobs for the future to do that. Creating those partnerships with the local universities and colleges, veterans, we've got some great organizations right here in town. Combat to Careers is a great one as well, where they're helping them transition. We have so many highly trained, it's not just for veterans anymore, if you know veterans. It used to be, a veteran was a grunt, it was an infantry guy, it was someone else, carried a gun. Now you've got all these high-tech things that they do. They come back and there's nothing to transition to in the civilian world. That's a very big issue. But I really think the crux of it is making those partnerships. You have a lot of power when you're in Congress to be able to go to industry and create hubs of technology. And that's what we need here. We need technology hubs. We need centers where people know that they're going to build out. And we need to inspire that growth so the kids and grandkids that are here now can make futures. So that would definitely be something I would do, is create those partnerships and alliances and bring home that money.
Thank you.
Look at this guy. Thanks, Neil.
Our next question is about bot farms. Many Jews do not vocal about your support for Israel. Some of the hatred is coming from influencers such as Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, but much of the hatred appears to be fostered by bots. AI fake videos and tens of thousands of bots paid for by Iran and others spew hatred 24/7, and they create an echo chamber, making these ideas seem popular and acceptable. What can Congress do to put a stop to these fake bots being allowed to dominate the internet? Any other ideas on reversing what Charlie Kirk called the brain rot of blaming Jews for all the problems in the world?
Well, show of hands, who's running the world? Who is nefariously behind all this? I want to start with the Candace, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, James Fishback disaster. If they were talking that way with buckets over their heads, it would still be disgusting. But the fact that they're inspiring an entire generation of hate is absolutely unacceptable. Now, to have bots feed into that, foment that, and pick at the kids that are following their content that spirals that hate, the Biden administration put in a group that was the Office of Misinformation. They weaponized it against good people. There is nothing saying, sure, free speech is one thing, but algorithmic tracking of hate speech can be stopped. And I would have no problem having committees, calling the big tech people in, finding out who's behind all this, using the DOJ, calling them to Capitol Hill, finding it out, and creating legislation that bans that across the country. It's got to be stopped, and at every level. We just saw this with Dan Goldman in New York 2 weeks ago. That was a coffee shop for a Jewish congressman. That is unacceptable at every level, and I hope it finally hit home for him how bad it is, and he can look at someone like Mamdani, who fostered that when he was running, and how anybody self-respecting could have voted for that guy. It's all got to be stopped at every level. We're seeing this with these socialists and communists running across the country, and they're all feeding into it as well. Chevalier, Lander, Graham Plattner. Called everybody Nazis in the Republican Party for 40 years. He's got a Nazi tattoo. And the Democrats go, he's one of ours. No, unacceptable. We've got to make sure we're fighting back of all that and putting legislation in place that'll stop it. I'll go with Carrie to start that off. The $3 trillion boondoggle that was the Department of Education that is being wound down by Secretary McMahon has to go. It has only served to drive down proficiencies in math, English, and be the center point for our indoctrination. And then you think about the indoctrination in the colleges for the last 40 years, it's nothing but Marxists. It's back to the hippies of the 60s and 70s that trained the next 3 generations. They've been trained to take down Israel, trained to take down faith. They want to take faith apart from these kids because it is so American and so uniting that it keeps them from being able to get in their heads and fill it with the nonsense. When you think about the schools from UCLA to NYU and what they've allowed for the last 10, 20 years, but the last 3 have just been disgusting. There's no other way. To keep the Jewish students out, to create these encampments for the Palestinian movement or whatever nonsense they've got going on up there, but they can't make it both ways. They can't look at the students of other faiths and the necessary equality and safety that they all deserve at $60,000 to $100,000 a year. I think if we cut that funding off, if we tax the endowments at these schools, if we made it punishable financially for them to foment and be hotbeds for this kind of hate, it would sit home very, very quickly, and they'd have to adjust their mindsets. When we saw the university presidents not too long ago up in front of Congress, none of them could answer for the anti-Semitism on their campuses, and that was unacceptable. And they should have found very, very swift ways to punish them for that. And I'm with Carrie. We've got to cut off that funding very, very quickly and let them know. Now, his daughter's at that school. Our daughter just graduated high school. She's on her way out to Chapman University in California. One of the top film schools. It's very creative. It's also the #1 Holocaust remembrance and Jewish studies school in the nation. When we toured that school, they have Holocaust museums above all 9 of their libraries. They're very heavily funded, and that nonsense will not be going on, and that was a big deciding factor for us. It's a beautiful school with a beautiful, beautiful set of morals and values that we definitely are excited for her to go out and be a part of.
Cool. Very nice. A related question on the foreign influence in university research. Many Americans are deeply alarmed by the degree to which foreign nationals from adversarial nations such as China and states with Islamist dictators who regularly host terror organizations and act as our economic rivals such as Qatar and Turkey, people are concerned that they have access to research at American universities involving emerging technologies and national security. Trump briefly talked about banning Chinese students, but the universities that depend on Chinese funding apparently compelled Trump to change his mind. Shouldn't universities whose viability depends on Chinese funding be allowed to fail or downsize? What laws can be passed to prevent hostile or high-risk foreign agents from co-funding, accessing, or shaping our vital research? And Tim, you go first on this one.
This is multifaceted. The first facet to this is cutting off the number of foreign students and opening these American universities up to American students who are working hard, but the slots are getting smaller and smaller. And thinking about where these students are coming from. If they're coming from China, Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, Turkey, Erdogan's not our friend. The Turks are hardcore radical Muslims, so let's think about this. But when it comes to funding, from outside influence especially, we've really got to look into this with transparency. So I'll circle back real quick to the good doctor in our race as well, who's done a very good job initially of hiding his reality. He was not a Hindu boy that was adopted by Catholic priests and learned to read using the Bible. He sat on the board of trustees for the Islamic Center of Orlando until 2 weeks before declaring his run, and they scrubbed every bit of evidence about who he is off the internet. We have it all. I want to know where the funding is for the growth of these mosques, for the amount of money that's going into these colleges and universities, and I want full transparency. And that's one thing I would pass legislation to make sure this outside influence gets cut off. So this ideology, it's not a religion, it's an ideology bent on the destruction of the Judeo-Christian faith to create a caliphate. We need to shut all this down as soon as possible, whether it's the universities or the mosques. With the $3.8 billion memorandum of understanding that we have with Israel, that is not a gift. It's a gift card to come back and buy American weaponry. So that relationship is deep. But this is just on its foundation. Israel and America share something very important, the birthplace of our 2 religions that need to be protected. Our faiths start right there in the Holy Land. That needs to be protected. When you talk about this war, we'll talk about Obama putting in yet another failed policy, the JCPOA, toothless, unenforceable, and according to Senator Kennedy just a couple days ago that rattled off the latest intel, they weren't months, weeks, or days away. They were hours away from full uranium enrichment, and they did have intercontinental ballistic missiles with a 2,400 square mile range that could have gotten all of Europe. But did Europe step up? Not only did they not step up, they didn't let us land on the bases that we pay for. They didn't let us in Aviano, Italy, England, France, Germany, bases that we've had for 50 years since we bailed them out the last time. But who did step up? Israel came to us with the intelligence. Israel was sortie for sortie with us, plane for plane, bombing to remove this threat that was as much theirs as anybody else's. Because Iran has already shown, like Kerry said, through every proxy they have, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, they're surrounded on all sides. They have no qualms about arming and training the people that want to come after them on any given day. Now, this is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be, when the memorandum of understanding expires in a year and a half, and if I'm in Congress, I will not only vow to sign on to that and approve it, but extend it for another 10 years with an increase that will offset the price of the inflation of the weapons, that will not only support the Iron Dome, but all the technology that we continue to exchange to make both of our countries stronger. Israel's a trading partner of missile technology, drones, irrigation, agriculture, even the ways we use to drive our car, the navigation device, we got from Israeli technology. They're a partner and an ally at every turn, so we have to foster that relationship. Hi. Yes, real quick. So the first one was the foreign students.
Yes.
That can be addressed at every level. They need immigration status to come in and be a foreign student. A lot of the colleges and universities lie to us under the guise that bringing in these foreign students, it enriches the cultural opportunities of their other students, when in reality, just like Kerry said, it's all about money. Each of the students nowadays are required or highly encouraged to do study abroad, so they're getting that cultural experiment. Mind you, it's not Chinese foreign student. All the kids I know went to Italy. So good on them. But we can shut them off at every level. And I understand these colleges, if you want to talk about a bloated bureaucracy, the colleges have been bloating their DEI infrastructure, their administrative infrastructure, as they raise the prices every year, and the professors aren't seeing any big gains. So why has it gone from $23,000 to $35,000 to $75,000 a year for our kids to go to these schools, and where's it going? Lower those prices, keep those foreign students out, and leave those spots open for our kids that are looking to get educations and bring that knowledge back. Your second question was?
Do you need a supermajority to pass a bill?
No, and like Kerry said, that can be done through simple legislation or as an addendum that may or may not have to go back to the states, but no, I think that's an easy fix for the birthright citizenship. It was specifically led to the legislature, like the Supreme Court said, under the jurisdiction thereof. So they've given the legislature the opportunity to go back and do that. So Sharia law and the Muslim issue, like was said, it's an ideology. It is not a religion, and we're finding that out now with banning things like CARE, the Council on Arab-Islamic Relations. So I was on the radio on 970 WFLA in Tampa back in the mid-2000s, filling in for the hosts, political conservative talk radio station, and I had a guy on the station on a regular basis named Sami Al-Arian. And I caught on very quickly, this guy's a terrorist.
Yes.
And guess who got picked up as a terrorist? Sami Al-Arian. He was with CARE, and he was a professor at USF Tampa. So now you look, and CARE is the spokeswing for most of the mosques, including in Orlando, St. Pete, Tampa. They've just been deemed, they were banned from the state capitol by Ron DeSantis, and he's now joining forces with Texas, hopefully Michigan very shortly, and a couple other states to make CARE officially a terrorist organization. We can and we will ban Sharia law, and we will ban the expansion of these places by considering them an ideology and pulling them aside from the freedom of religion. A religion has a faith to it that does not have a doctrine or a separate set of laws, and we can make sure that this gets banned. I will join the Sharia Free America Caucus and push this.
Larry?
Voter ID. Voter ID.
Two amazing points. First, it takes more ID to get in Rohan and Ezel than it does to vote, and that's insane. We went to the Savannah to go to the DAR event on Saturday morning. They said, you can stand out to the side, you're not villagers. President Trump has already started to primary out the holdovers, the senators that just couldn't get it together and let his legislation get passed. I'm forever frustrated by the fact that we don't get as much done with the majority as the Democrats do with the minority. It's beyond infuriating. But Thune has to be put on notice because he's not just holding back the Save America Act, he's holding back recess appointments by the hundreds that is unprecedented with a majority. That has to be fixed. The Save America Act, you've got to clean the voter rolls. You've got to get the illegals off. State by state, they can't be allowed to vote. They're saying, well, being counted in the census and the voter rolls because local and state elections impact them, you're still not a citizen. You still should not be voting, driving, or driving a truck without an American ID that requires a birth certificate and the other things that it takes us to do. And read English. And your other question, sir, was?
Should people who hate this country be allowed to run for public office?
So here's my fix on that one. Just like when we joined the military a long time ago, we took an oath. We raised our hand. For many, you have to put it on some sort of a good book. If you can't cite that oath, you should not be able to hold that office. That's all I got right there.
So I was elected in November 2.
So fun facts. The last time they passed a budget on time was 1997. The last time they submitted, not passed, a balanced budget was 2000, 26 years ago. So we look at the waste, fraud, abuse, which could be trillion and a half. Some of that is also in federal to state redundancies like the Department of Education. There's EPA redundancies. There's a lot of redundancies that be cut out at the federal level. And we've already seen one of the greatest job growths while at the same time removing federal workers from basically what was a giant welfare program. They went building by building and found empty buildings. They found in those same buildings there were 800 employees and 2,500 licenses for Microsoft Word. There have got to be a ways, as a business owner of 3 small businesses, then not that small, they've got a comma, they're good businesses. But as a business owner, that's one of the reasons I want to be on the budgeting committee, not the appropriations committee where you're handing it out, but the budget committee where I can look at a budget year over year and wonder, when our population has only gone up 3%, why is this expenditure, like let's say Somali daycare, gone up 60% year over year over year? There's got to be some common sense up there going over the budgets. We've got to quit making what they do to us every year is they say, we cut the spending 6%. No, you had a 10% allocated spending and you cut it 6%, and you're still giving us a 4% increase on a $6 trillion budget. We've got to make actual cuts. Like Carrie said, we got to do the hard things, make the hard decisions. I know people in some of these states are relying on these jobs, but if they're not real jobs that are producing real results for the American people, they're going to have to, as Obama used to say, learn to code. They're going to have to find things to do that are more productive than living off the United States government because it's become a giant welfare program. We've got to make real cuts, submit real budgets, and if it requires it, although like term limits and not insider trading, I don't think the federal government, the Congress is going to put in a balanced budget amendment, which would actually require them to do hard work. It's going to take individuals that go up there and get to work. As a business owner, it's something I've been doing for the last 15 years. As a venture capitalist before that, I would look at everybody else's books and say, we're not funding you. You're not fiscally sound. I'm a fiscal hawk, and I plan to be one when I get up there.
Thank you.
So one of the first things I did when I declared to run for this office, about 2 days in, I signed the U.S. term limits pledge. I realized there's an issue with when you get in, they don't give you any good committees. But I've already started, like with our talk 2 days after I got back from DC with Jim Jordan, and said, Mr. Jordan, can you make sure I've got a mentor up there that will make sure I'm getting on good committees to be as effective and impactful as humanly possible, as soon as possible? That said, I want to get up, make an impact, come home. That's really the way it was intended. Like, the framers didn't necessarily put in term limits. The term limits are called elections, but absolutely I would self-limit. And the other fact is, for a lot of people, it's turned into a giant convalescent home. I just can't abide by that. I can't, if you need to live off the system or you need power and influence that bad, find something else to do. People have asked me as well, why didn't you start at the city, county, state level before you go federal? I don't want to run when I'm 72 for U.S. House. I want to be here, somewhere in Sawgrass or somewhere in Brownwood, watching a band. I mean, my uncle wallpapered all the rec centers before he passed. He brought me up here and showed me around. When I came up here 25 years ago, the town halls had Glenn Miller. 10 years later, it was a Steve Miller. Now they're playing Bon Jovi. It's my time. I want to be here. I don't want to be up in D.C.
And I think it's necessary.
All right. In talking with people like Andy who run a very lean municipality, it is going to be a little different. It's going to be a little more difficult for the cities. So you can go on things like leagueofcities.com to find out how the cities will be impacted. But then as you watch Blaise Ngolia, our CFO for the state, go county to county and find the hundreds of billions of overspending, he created a format that accounted for inflation and population growth and found that a lot of cities were making up to 60% more in tax revenue than should have been acceptable. So those counties can figure it out. The cities are going to need some kind of an implementation plan that the governor has in place that they've discussed to get them through the next 3 to 5 to 10 years in a reasonable way so they don't have to cut services, giant potholes, one cop that has to run around on a scooter. It's going to be very interesting to see how they do that. I'm with a lot of people on this. I'm for it. I think people deserve it. The initial increase in homestead exemption is to $250, but again, you're looking at the home prices considerably higher than that. So yeah, it definitely needs to be looked at and needs to be increased over time. I think it's going to pass because this is one of those things where people will look out for their own best interest. But I think the cities and the counties have very different challenges on how to address this.
Indeed.
Well, I'm going to quote one of the greats, Andy Bilardello. I'm not running to be a politician. I'm running to be a servant. I served at 17. I'm looking forward to serving again. It's one of the most important parts. I wanted to bookend my service and bookend my life, and this is my legacy. I defected to Florida 35 years ago from California. Thank you. Every time I go back, I'm even more glad that I escaped. I love it here. Like I said, my uncle wallpapered the rec centers. This is a very special place. I lived down in Winter Garden for the last 12 years, and it's something that is so important to me to be a part of what happens next, to be a part of the future. A few weeks ago when my wife and I were up in DC, it's only happened 3 times. I had chills wash over me. When I enlisted, when I was in Afghanistan performing for the troops with the USO, and when I stood on Capitol Hill, my wife was shooting a video, and she said, look over your shoulder, and the flag was waving over the Capitol, and it washed over me the severity of what I'm doing, severity of this office. I'd like to think I'm bringing a very wide swath of knowledge across multiple industries, the discipline and the leadership from the Marine Corps, and my faith, very important, and 30 years of communication skills, which, by the way, is a very important part of the job. You can look at this and say, well, there's that middle ground where you were on TV. Yes. And you were a comedian. Yes. Ronald Reagan did movies with monkeys. Donald Trump is the funniest president in history. Yeah. And you've got 2 talk show hosts in secretarial positions. Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of War, and Sean Duffy is the Secretary of Transportation. That communication skill matters. I appreciate Lee putting this on. I appreciate all of you coming out to be so engaged and so important that the gravitas of this election and making sure that this is a Republican district, but the right Republican is representing you in Congress in our district. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Jewish Conservatives Club, I thank you both for speaking with us, and I thank you for your decades of service to our country and our state. Our district will be very fortunate to have either one of you as our representative. The Republican primary is for Florida's 11th congressional district is Tuesday, August 18th. Be sure to vote early. Thank you, everyone, for being active, caring citizens. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. You guys were so amazing.